How? Through the subtly camouflaged usurpation and destruction of values created, built, or earned by others. In fact, those value destroyers use neo-cheating without fear of being caught, without suspicion, and they are successful to the extent that they use neo-cheating. Consider how many of the most successful politicians have for years destructively regulated and harmfully controlled the value producers. You said it's us. It's the values of us.
It's called birthright theft.
They have neo-cheated the public for unearned personal power.
Yes.
Their power ploys have created jungles of destructive regulations and inefficiencies. They hassle busy individuals, cripple creative scientists, and prevent private enterprise from fully developing its productive and technological capacities. That arrogated authority not only diminishes everyone's spirit, but diminishes everyone's standard of living, and even prevents the development of cures for scourges such as heart disease, cancer, and AIDS. I'm gonna stop right there. But I'm just saying, in 1998, 32 years ago, or 22 years ago, this man wrote this book, which is 500 and some pages, and that's just that's in the intro. But he may as well have written it today. As I've gone through this, he may as well has written it today, and it is my understanding that they did some, no pun intended, trumped up charges and
to get him out of the way.
Him after writing this book, which is liberation.
Exactly.
This is a liberating tool for anyone, and it's easy to read and easy to understand.
Exactly.
Turns the light bulb on, and how many of us could be in another place?
Yes.
Just by it, and it's not even stuff we don't know. It becomes stuff that you forgot.
And then look at this way. This is from a political perspective, right? That is another statement of simply telling you the operations of colonial operations. He's telling you what the parasitism is.
He talks about the media and everything. We're being
because
bombarded.
it's all
entertainment.
It's all networked. As an example, where you see Abdullah talking about for years, or where they change the hertz in language in music, right, to dumb the people down, also to cause what you call vibrational sickness. Truthfully, and by the people not knowing the culture, they don't know that vibration is part of more science, is also part of healing. Where sound and light have always been traditionally part of African culture for healing, etc. And so they've lost cognizance of ancient established principles. And this is also part of the vampirism. So again, while the world is waking up, the people here are waking up. They're a little, compared to the rest of the world, they're a little slow indeed, because the belief systems have been imposed upon our people for so many generations that they've actually stopped taking responsibility for divine reasoning, thinking that their so-called religious orders were a divine protection. In other words, they start believing things without examination. Whereas, and this is back to the point, where you talked about how the people forgot, if they actually even went back to childhood, the basic inquisition, or the basic inquisitiveness that a child has, if they even maintain that, most of them in thinking would start liberating themselves a long time ago. And this is again why it was so important for the dark priesthood to burn books and to enforce expurgatorius and prohibitorum. That's vital in the politics of the United States. And as a matter of fact, you can see expurgatorius and prohibitorum blatantly, and this is back to what we're talking about, the proclamation, blatantly operating through the social medias. As soon as you start talking anything that really helps the people,
shadow ban.
They will shadow ban, they'll demonetize, they'll attack, they'll even send assassins out in the name of de facto warrants, etc., which is also what they did to a couple of sisters that had suits on them actually a few years back, and literally went in their houses and murdered them. Yes, they did. You know, and by the people thinking that these people are actually legitimate government, they start thinking about what did this woman do to cause them to shoot her and her child? What did she do? Type thing. That, see, that meant that's a training.
Right.
It never dawns on them that these people are mercenaries. And yet it's so blatant. Not unlike this recent attempted assassination of that brother they told to get out of the car recently, and they beat him down. As a matter of fact, you could see one of the so-called sheriff definitely actually put his hand on his nose trying to smother him, and the sister was taking pictures, and he moved his hand. They're going to kill him like they did George Floyd. And as a matter of fact, that's current. That was in this past week, and they beat the brother up. Oh yeah, but we know what it is. You know, it's unum sanctum operations, but our people need to know that that's what it is. But the deal of it is they're showing their hand, all masks are off. The major thing is for the people to understand is that these people are not your government. They are contracting mercenaries to enforce unum sanctum operations, which the people know about. It's not racism, it's not prejudice, it is war. They're warring against the people. And they've used the people's own taxes to actually hire contractors to war on the people. That's really the truth. And people are truthfully, when you start examining some of the statements people make, they're actually in denial of that because they don't want to accept that these people are really warring against them. Because there's two things. If you pay attention to some of the statements that are made by some of the people when you start talking about constitutional principles and treaty principles, the way they respond to it as if you're introducing them to something that's going to hurt them indicates that they have become slaves to the corporate operators. The fact that they fear persons that they think or have been calling government is indicative of the fact that these people are warring on them. Since when does a so-called public servant that taxes you and then war against you become your master? And what point do you start denying that that's what the relationship is, which is really what's going on right now. But again, the proclamation in law, from a principle of law, is firing them and for publicly any claims that they have been making on the stock market or in international trade that they have jurisdictional power over you. It is a rebuttal and a reversion of a state. This is another reason why they're mad, because really, and people don't know this, it kills the bonds. People are looking for them to respond and say, oh, we've got your papers and stuff. And, you know, we know that, you know, we're obligated. They're not the organized criminals. What you need to understand is the instruments that they have created already on the stock market that actually is a foundation of their wealth that they do not convert back to the people. They give it to Wall Street, because that's part of the unum sanctum operations. See, this is what it is. When the people go out there and work on their job, J-O-B, for private commercial paper, they're trained from childhood that they're getting paid money. They're not getting paid money. They're getting voucher transfers. These are licensed voucher transfers. And even people that talk about fiat often won't be honest with the people and tell them bluntly what it really is. The Federal Reserve notes are licensed, which is on itself conditional, voucher transfer instruments on debt. That's what they are. That's exactly what they are. Now, so which means the persons who receive them are goaded into thinking that they're building wealth when they're actually building debt. Now, because they get things for them, right? They're under the guise that they're gaining when actually they're going deeper in debt. And what you'll really pay attention to, they've trained the people in consumerism. But when you really analyze what the people have been consuming, for the most part, 80% of everything that people have been buying in the last 20 to 30 years are things that have no what you call legs or long life value. They become obsolete. They become obsolete, right? They become obsolete, and they become problematic, and they become essentially useless. So now you have what you call a discard platform, what you call recyclables, right? Hold on. Now, I want you to pay attention to what I said a little earlier. When the nations no longer buy U.S. Treasury bonds, those of you who are listening, I want you to pay attention to this because I've told you about this for a while. Do you notice, and I noticed this the other day when I was sweeping up outside and cleaning up, that the trash collectors, who are usually late, right, we're now taking both the recycle blue cans and the regular trash together, whereas before they used to send separate trucks. But I recognized what I was looking at. What my neighbor was saying, was making note of that, right? But I understood it because what has happened is this. I just want you all to notice this. This is relative to international trade. The Manchurians, who you generally know as Chinese, put a stop to the U.S. corporation and England, etc., sending their recycled trash to China, which they also made, other products with. And so the real deal is that the recycling industry that was 300 billion average a year came to a screeching halt. So that's why you see the trash is being mixed again now. So now, so that means that industry is now being affected. And so now you're dealing with both the shipping and the flights. So you have the trade windows of the world, which has froze up. And many of the containers that were coming from China were being sent back with all these plastic containers and stuff. And China is no longer accepting that. That's another part of what I've been telling you all for years, that they're going to stop buying U.S. Treasury bonds. So that is also part of the market operation. So start paying attention to the trash people taking both the recycles and the regular trash together. The other thing I want to make mention to you, the fiat currencies, which right, wrong, or indifferent includes digital, etc., are collapsing. So they're trying to cover up the fact that they robbed all of the retirement funds, all the pension funds, etc. And your major corporate city operations at North America, as an example, Philadelphia, Chicago, San Francisco, Kansas City, etc. These different political jurisdictions operating on the land. We're not talking about the land itself, and we're not talking about the people of the land. We're talking about the corporate operators and the operating on the land, etc. Have robbed the people to the degree that they cannot meet the liabilities attached to both retirement funds, pension plans, etc. And they don't want the people to really find out and figure out that the politicians themselves, under being members of the Roman Curia, have actually, they didn't break anything. The system wasn't broke. The system worked perfectly. The purpose was to rob the people. It's just that they're not in the optional position to continue to rob other nations, because the nations of the earth are no longer in this what you call fired up atmosphere of buying U.S. Treasury bonds, which we told you they were going to stop doing, and you have a feedback loop. And so the real deal is, this is another reason why they're pushing digital, because keep in mind, whereas fiat currency or fiat notes being fiat and being worthless to the degree that other nations have their treasuries predominantly covered with what you call the reserve currency, which is why they didn't do a lot of things sooner, etc. Why also the members of the Roman Cure want to go to digital so they could rob the people quicker than they did before. Because the real deal is the real money is silver and gold. And I want you to recognize this. For those, I'm not going to go into this. Read Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution for the United States. Whenever you're thinking about any of the so-called governors or mayors of the cities or city council or any of these people that have been telling you that what we've been telling you is a joke or that is false or it's going to get you in trouble, which they always say, it only gets you in trouble to the degree is that they attack anybody that has knowledge or who won't submit. Now, so you'll see that they cannot pay any debt or create anything but gold or silver coin for payment of debt. So these people were thinking that they were paying debt with the private commercial paper fiat. And the fact of the matter is they were going deeper and deeper in debt. So I just want to remind you of that. Go ahead.
I was listening to the David Wilcock.
Yeah.
And took some screenshots. And one in particular, he talked about the alliance. In 2009, they had met, a number of nations had met. The Gulf Arabs were planning, along with China, Russia, Japan, and France, to end dollar dealings of oil, moving instead to a basket of currencies.
Called SDRs.
Right.
Yeah.
So including, I guess, the Japanese yen, the Chinese yuan, the euro, gold, and a new unified currency planned for nations in the Gulf Cooperation Council, including Saudi Arabia, Abu Dhabi, Kuwait, and Qatar. And this was in 2009. And what happened, 2008, they thought it was going to be over with, but then the feds pumped all of this stimulus.
They call it a quantitative easing. In other words, what they did,
out and bail it,
they created fraud on top of the fraud on top of fraud. And this is when you see, at that time, you see the accelerated wars they were having, the endless wars that they've been having. Also, and why they've been so adamantly against Donald Trump for trying to stop these endless wars operations. And that's their in-house fighting among themselves, etc. Because, and this is back to the fact that they're no longer buying U.S. Treasury bonds. We've been telling people for the last 10 years, you know, and again, we've been telling them, you know, while you're trying to survive, they're forcing you, but make sure that you get some silver mainly. Now, and keep this in mind, when the Moors are still in power, and this is before the hybrid Germans who have been trying to pretend to be us for years, etc., took over the Yetta, etc., and the trade routes, etc., that prior to their operations, that the silver was basically like 1 to 2 in relationship to gold.
Yeah.
Now, and that's a fact. And the fact that the technology, even though we had the technology actually for millennia, as far as the modern world has learned some of the old alchemy tricks of the ancient Canaanite Moabites and have been able to extract silver a little easier, which is only why it came to the point of being 13 to 1 type thing. However, in the real world, it's leaning back towards that ancient principle. And the world knows this. What they don't want the common people to know this. This is another reason why I'm appreciating that you have been actually sharing with the people and trying to get the people to acquire silver while they can.
And that's mainly because I remember what you've been saying all these years, and I hadn't heeded it. And got a couple of pieces before this, and it was a little bit harder to get. You know, now it kind of comes to the house, but I'm saying it was echoing in my ear. Get your fiat out of the bank. Only have as much in there as you need to survive on a monthly basis. Because
we're under occupation, not because you're supporting that system.
Right.
Because you know realistically that they're warring on you. And so You know how I like to say it's sort of like recognizing when someone in government is turning an army on the people. You know, you don't submit to them because you honor them. You submit to them because they're criminals.
And
but you keep in you keep
know
in
who they
no,
are,
because you
but
know that they hurt women and children. They sacrifice children. So what do you think they think about you? And this is where people do not understand when they start saying, how can they, you know, I can't believe that the members of the Federal Reserve been doing this fiat currency since 1913, and they converted all allodial titles and aboriginal titles to mortgages and deeds, fooling the people, blah, 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 blah. How many generations of sacrifice is going to take you to recognize that these people are criminals? That's the really interesting thing, Dr. Naila. You know, their track record tells you all you need to know. What are you going to do on your own, with your own, by your own volition? You know, it's like saying, Dr. Naila, why do we need silver? The fact if they ask you that indicates part of the problem. You know, and then they'll start calling the private commercial paper, even after all this exposure of knowledge, call it money. It's not money, never was, it's not going to be money. Now, this is the deal. For inflation, which they're going to get in spades before this year is out, and is really going to show up as 21 comes in. Some of your biggest investors operating on the land at North America, one of which many other investors and stock holders always use as a what you call a focal point to make decisions.
Yeah,
and his name is Warren Buffett. Mm-hmm. He's dumping all U.S. stocks. He's been doing it before they admitted it on the public. But we already know this, which is why this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to get our people to spend less time on useless things, spend less energy on frivolous things, humble themselves, simplify their lives, and try to preserve what they have, which is also a target for the taking as we speak. Fact, this is the uncomfortable truth. The people of the land of North America for these next few years, minimally, are not going to be gaining anything, no matter what they do. Their greatest struggle will be trying to hold on to what they even have, which is already been hypothecated. You already know that most of them are not even aware what hypothecation even means. So you all write that down, hypothecation, because that's what is also in operation as we speak and has been operating, etc. The other thing that the criminals plan to do as you wake up is they're going to accelerate the theft of your estates under the guise of what you call inflation, while at the same time in secret amassing as much silver as they can in their personal coffers. And I guarantee you, not because I'm saying so, you're going to experience it for yourself, that while we've been telling you for the last 10 so years to get some silver, you'll be lucky if you can, at any price of the fiat, get this, because they're not even going to accept it. Less more having enough to acquire anyway. Now, the importance of this as a silver. Now, your gold, you'll be holding that more as a hedge type thing, or what you call sort of as an insurance issue. But the silver can be spent around the world. And even though you're not going to get what you call change in emergency, you can spend this around the world and at least feed your family for what is or may be available. Because like Noble Drew Ali said, and he warned the Moors, he said the Europeans are going to try to starve you out. So already understand that's all. It's not so much coming, it's already here. It's just that they're disguising it with directed energy weapons. So what you're going to see is strange fires in strategic places all over the place. And with the GMOs, you already know that that you're not going to be getting what you will call renewable green available to the average person who has not been buying those things in this past years, because they've been taking that stuff off the market to make sure that you can't grow anything that's seeded by them and it reproduce for the next year. So you already know that the genocide operations of Executive Order 11490, Rex 84, has already been in operation since 1969. It's not new. It's 1969. So when you talk about Neotech and 1998,
yeah.
98 area, that's a person who knew about King Alfred. And of course, conscious Moors know. The problem that we really have is trying to get our own family members to take these things serious, because you can't save the world. That's number one. And number two, you can't, even with the evidence, convince people who don't deal with facts to understand that these people are not their government. And it's an unfortunate reality, but it's like this in real life, if you don't accept reality, nature does not necessarily stop things from happening just because you're not being realistic. The hybrid Europeans have a solid track record of genocide against all Aboriginal people. It's not racism, it's not prejudice, it's unum sanctum operations. The fact that the people don't want to accept that just because we've told them that's what it is, because it's exactly what it is. What it has allowed is them to entrench themselves.
A lot of people would probably disagree with you from the standpoint, especially when you say it's not racism, because we have been indoctrinated to believe.
And you're right about the indoctrination.
Yeah,
but continue.
Right, to believe that what we're going through is something called racism. There's the human race, I say, and the hybrid race. So figure out which one you are. It's not racism. I get it. It's something that was set in motion,
See, it's sort of like, how it's like if someone's like if someone's been robbing, like when you told you mentioned earlier, and a lot of people have been suffering this cyber theft. And cyber theft is because once you activate a phone, as an example, right? A cell phone is no longer yours.
Right.
Once you activate an account with any bank system, it's no longer yours.
That's true.
The members of the Roman Curia are already set up to systematically rob people's accounts and act like it's somebody else that got your credit number to one of your cards and is robbing your account, etc. And if you notice how, as an example, if on the de facto platforms, if you owe them 20 notes, you get responses from them right away.
Just like the bread. Bread.
Right away.
So three months in a row now, I noticed I got a charge for
and
the
if
same
you hadn't brought it up,
right,
it wouldn't have been brought up.
And it says bread. And I'm thinking, bread?
Yeah, bread means...
I paid bread for $128.40. And why?
It sure doesn't sound like a name, does it?
Right. And then I said, bread. Money that's the slang for so-called money.
Now,
maybe they're just taking my bread.
Now look at, yes, if it was physical bread, it would set alarms, because what bread costs $150?
$28.40 every month.
Yeah, which is a pattern.
Right.
But we're not even talking about patterns. We're talking about...
people don't... If you have a reasonable amount, say, in your account, say like me, who may not... Back in the day, I had to balance everything. I don't even carry a checkbook or anything. I don't balance anything, because I never...
And they know that the average person ends up doing that.
So when you don't, you can overlook these subtleties where they're robbing you.
Which is they've been doing anyway.
Yeah.
Now, let's look at this. It's no different. How it is, like, for instance, like, like when they were doing certain phone programs where they call roaming or something like that, where people make outside calls and
then then you paid more.
Yes. All right. You notice how it never misses a beat. Never misses a beat. And if you default in any area, you're immediately notified, or your stuff is turned off and things like that. But yet, you notice that when you have counts for them, that people get robbed daily, and if you don't report it, they don't say nothing. Now, however, they have programs where they'll charge you finance, where they'll notify you once in a while if something looks suspicious type thing. Right. But you pay them for it. But if you didn't pay them for that, you wouldn't get
suspicious activity in your account.
And the other deal, like when you had the issue about certain packages been sold, they robbed your account for almost $2,000.
Right. They did.
And said that you bought something that you didn't buy.
That's right.
And then when they're supposed, hold on. The time span. Now,
a year.
You know, Rand, in my mind, this is what ran in my mind. The reason why they're not doing what you would expect, this so-called investigation, the way they say they do, because it's an inside ring, and your complaint caught them. So if they invest, they open up a can of worms. So they ain't trying to get the package back. You understand what's really? This is the point that I'm making to you.
The audience may not know what we're talking about.
Yeah, but we know what we're talking about. The deal.
But we're just basically saying to pay attention to what you have, particularly if you still have finances in their banks, because there are really fishy, foul things going on.
Because they're robbing you. See, this whole idea, they still have the people spooked. They still have the people thinking that these anomalies are outside entities. You know, like they'll rob, like say, for instance, this is what they've been doing. By process, by rightful process, many of these branch bank entities should have collapsed a long time ago, right? So they've been robbing people's accounts, and they'll tell us, well, we had, you know, after they get people's accounts and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. Right. You remember they already got everybody's accounts, right?
Right.
Who think that these accounts belong to them. And after a year or so, or sometimes 2 years, of robbing people on a massive scale, and somebody finds out about it and publishes it, and 9 times out of 10, when these things become public, is usually some person who has been robbed that does a video or makes it public, and then you'll see a bank entity come out and say, "Oh, we've discovered that such and such a bank was breached 2 years ago to the tune of something multi-millions of dollars, blah, blah, blah. And they've got so many millions of people's accounts numbers and stuff like that." You ever notice that that's the pattern?
Yeah.
All right. Because they don't want you to know that they did it. So somebody in Ukraine did it.
We'll never know who did it.
They had somebody in East Blitzelstan.
In another country.
Yes.
And they're robbing the accounts.
Yeah, and the Chinese did it. And the reason why your pension ain't there because the Russians interfered with your accounts. And the people keep falling for it. However, the reality of it is that all of those platforms are collapsing because the rest of the world's not buying their treasury. That's what they don't want you to pay attention to. And the reason they're tearing up all these cities under the guise of like Black Lives Matter and stuff like that is so that when all this stuff hits the fan, that they can blame the people for it. When the 90% of this criminality that's going on has absolutely nothing to do with the people whatsoever, but are actually operatives of the Roman Curia. All these so-called movements are infiltrated, and all the injuries and destruction is coming from people who you thought were your congressmen and senators who are really in a state of sedition. Now that's really the truth, and they've always been that.
And we didn't know it.
The people just in their hearts, the people, they don't want to accept it.
Let me tell you how our local so-called local government mirrored our so-called national federal so-called government. As I see it, for the last almost 4 years, the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, the House and the Senate, have spent, who we allegedly elected to represent us, have spent the whole time from before this man was actually took the oath of office, trying to get him out of office, and have done absolutely nothing for the people.
It never had before.
But now it becomes more
It's
apparent.
now
Now it's more
aren't the
obvious.
mask off? Aren't the mask
The
off?
masks are off. In our local government, we have a council, city council.
Yes.
We've had factions within the council. Most of them are melanated, look
Yeah.
like us. One faction against the other faction, and the council president in the middle of nobody. One person, had some law. There's a Turner.
So you have
and all this
tokens.
stuff. So we've had this. They have literally spent the whole last 4 years fighting each other, getting up and done. And so the people now are faced, if you do choose to participate in the so-called electoral process, to me, I'm trying to say to people, don't worry about whether they're Republican, they got a D or an R. Who are they? What have they done? What is their record? And just like Ice Cube said, don't give your so-called vote away. We have to get something in return.
Now, let's look at this.
We never asked for anything. We just accepted what we've been thrown. Like, here you go.
And respectfully, the fact that, someone with some celebrity like Ice Cube would even make that statement still must be examined, because this is back to the other point.
The mask off to be able to see that these people don't represent anyone but themselves.
And they never did.
That they've been down in the DC swamp for all of these years and getting rich off of what we hear about foreign aid to foreign aid offshore accounts. Now you can see.
What is foreign aid? Now let's look at this.
I call them offshore accounts.
No, let's look. That's what they are and what they always was. Yeah. Now, and this is back to fundamental civics as an example, right? And this is also back to the proclamations, because they're claiming to represent you and then using that foundation as the political sovereign power that they've been exercising in trade with other. This is what people need to understand. However, show, and I challenge anyone, including the trolls that come on these different venues, to show in law, in treaty, in constitution, where any of these so-called congressmen, senators, or representatives were authorized to tax the people of this land to the point of billions of energy a year and send it to other nation states.
Yeah.
No, the claimed authority is the evidence of the fraud. It's just that it's run out, and these people still have not caught on that these people are their enemies.
Well, why would funds be sent to another nation when your own so-called people that you represent, their people are still homeless and jobless and without health care and without representation? All of these things that is lacking right here.
What is the intelligent response or conjunctive statement to that analysis?
There's a bunch of BS.
No, this is what it is. It is obvious that they never represented you, that they're robbing you, the very fact that they're doing it, not why. What you see in Los Angeles, in Oregon, in Seattle, in Philadelphia, in Chicago, with people in tents, was purposeful. The fact that these people won't accept that these people in government is their enemies, the problem.
And government controlling the mental.
That they're under attack. This is back to the proclamation. Whereas the votes that these people have been, propagating never counted anyway. What does count in law is that judicial notice and proclamation, because it comes from you, from your own venue, and it tells the world that you do not consent. That's what it is, a notice of non-consent.
I like that. And
it is a notice of non-consent.
Yeah, and
not a request.
That's right. And it says that we're publicly declaring that all rights I was born with, I reserve, reclaim, and preserve, which are unalienable rights.
Exactly. And though
and should we be putting that on
everything? See, that's now let's go back. Why do we do this for people out there that doesn't have a background? Because we need to push them ahead. Because remember, these arguments and these principles of reversion of a state are not being taught in the public forums. And logically, you, I, and others who care about the people, we don't have the options or the liberties or the venues by which these people, like they go to church, mosque, synagogue, temple, they don't have venues where they can get this kind of information because they don't know that half of these institutions are in cahoots with the Federal Reserve, whether they got 501c3s or any other skull and bones agreements. You know, they, for the most part, knowingly and unknowingly are compromised against the interests of the people. So these instrumentalities of the judicial notice create a problem for the international trade venues. It's sort of like the unfortunate reality is that we have to take some pain to liberate ourselves. Our people are looking for a benefit in a system that is actually bleeding them. And they're reluctant to do so, but they want the liberation. It doesn't go together. You can't serve two masters. It's an unfortunate reality, you know, and you can say it like that. And you know, and I know that the average person will start giving their opinion without examining the reality of the cause and effect of what's actually going on. Meaning that they'll look at, you know, just like we were saying earlier, people disagreeing. They can disagree or not. It matters not. When you're talking facts, an established record is not an issue of agreement. It's a matter of what it is. Now, you can accept it or reject it, but it doesn't change it. This is the problem that we have, is that people have been goaded into thinking or taking a positions of whether they agree or not, or whether they believe or not understanding that's not the reality. The reality of it is that these people are actually their enemy. It's not because I said so. I'm just observing and just telling the truth. I do research. I don't deal with beliefs. And you'd be surprised how many people get offended when you don't deal with beliefs and you deal with research and facts and establish what is called stare decisis, thinking that you're against their divinity, their perception of divinity, etc. And it's not unlike, you know, the harmonic statement made in the Bible where it says, study all things and keep that which is good. That's the position that I take. You know, when you study things, you think that you take that which is true, which is good, and the rest of it, you know, discard it. And the fact that people have not taken that principle as a rule of guiding their lives is part of why we're in trouble. And you'd be surprised how the people will take that position as actually being anti-spiritual, anti-God, anti-religious. But yet it is in their books that they claim to be a party to.
Well, I like the fact that you said it's not the paperwork that makes you.
It isn't.
It's you that makes the paperwork.
Exactly. The paperwork is there to establish, and they can actually be expanded, right? But the paperwork is structured in such a way that can be presented to a being that's not familiar and get them in a state of mind of familiarity to how they should be thinking, which is really what they're designed for, and then give them support systems, you know, reference systems where they can see that this is not, say, an idea being presented to them, but that this is the established jurisdictional facts that have been held back from you, which is why your other problems that you've been calling racism have allowed to flourish. Why you've been injured, because these things have not been enforced. You need to understand that relationship. And a lot of people don't understand that the judicial notice is a reversionary statement. It's a notice of reversionary claim. It's not a request at all. You know, so what in the nature, this is what it's doing. It's presenting to people who you know are frauds, who know themselves to be frauds, but who also know that the masses at large don't know that they're frauds. So you're operating, so you're against this force. Then they control the venues of the media to lock you out at every turn. And this is also why they would do personal attacks rather than factual attacks, if you get the point. Knowing that the people are been trained in bias, not in knowledge. See, so a person who's been trained in belief systems does not do what you call intellectual discernment by virtue of fact or epistemology or etymology. They deal with the emotions of belief, how they feel, or what someone told them without examination. They deal with what is known commonly as blind faith. Such persons logically in law are held as state wards. And so when you're looking to deal with solutions from a person in that state of mind, you're going to have great difficulties for yourself and for themselves. You know, and this is again why the proclamation is expanded. When actually a statement, a proclaimed statement, need only be a paragraph for those who are in honor. But when you have people that are not in honor, and then people who have been controlled by such persons, if you understand, you have to kind of, you know, show them some of the cards that are being played. So that, again, is the judicial notice. So the notice is putting people on notice, but it's also putting you on notice.
Basically, it's the process that you need to go through to immerse yourself in the reality of who you are.
Exactly. And what the obligations of treaties and constitutions, which are the supreme law of the land, why it's there. And you also discover that in people starting to relate to them and even asking questions after, which they should do, but you recognize the nature of some of the questions that the injury, because they don't recognize it, because it's not with them, because they're not cognate of what these papers present to the world.
Here's a question that's popped up like several times. Morris Mead is asking to ask you about the December 21st and the solar flares.
Well, December 21st, you can look at it this way. From an astrological position, cosmological position, you're dealing with the entry of the winter solstice.
So apparently,
or what they call, what they would call in religious order, the death of Jesus, or the death of the sun.
Apparently, this particular solstice is coming up. It's being touted as something that we are to expect solar flares that may have some, you know, maybe devastating, if you will, a catastrophic
part
effect.
of this is, and remember, and you've got to, now for those who have a question about it, I would suggest you go to the culture, to the earth culture, and do some astrological research, cosmological research, and answer it yourself, because you need to know, because that is your science. That's number one. And number two, whenever you're looking at any analysis from what you call an African perspective, remember they're always layered. They always have multiple meanings. So you must also look at, are they projecting to you a distraction or fear, knowing that the average person doesn't know that. Even when you look at those dates, always pay attention to dates and look at the cosmological and geometrical positionings that they take, the numerical positionings that they take. And knowing that our people have been steeped in belief systems distinguished from cosmological knowledge, that most of the people who have been steeped in belief systems immediately go into fear. You know, oh, what's going to happen? Right. Oh, an asteroid is going to hit in West Virginia.
Yeah, they've been talking about asteroid too.
Yeah. In other words, like this, but what does it do? It takes your mind off of what? Corrupt rulers. 90% of the injury that's coming from you is going to come from you from some man or woman with 2 legs, 2 arms, claiming to have authority over your personality, your person, your estate, your economics, or is robbing you. look at the falling star and shit. You know, and
Look at the people that said it was full of
and the devil's behind the mountain. We'll see where the dark shade is over there. And then you got your hand in your pocket, you know, it'll punch you in the back of the head. Hey, what's a ghost? You know.
What they're trying to do is to influence the collective consciousness because they know about, you know, we talk about, you know, that field of you know what I mean, where everything is in an energetic field of consciousness. When we all start to think
if
of the same
you
thing,
slow down,
yeah.
You know how, like, when Drew Ali always told the Moors, listen to that still voice. Why? What it's really telling you is that nature herself, Mother Nature herself, will start healing your wiring if you're not distracted, if you're not full of fear, if you start using your divine mind.
If you have your heart chakra activated.
Isn't that called sincerity and honor?
Absolutely.
If you are in honor, nature aids you. See, this is the deal. We've gotten so disharmonic with nature, with the nature of self, and with the nature of nature herself, that we have made ourselves default subject to dogmata, priesthood, and the dark operations of inquisitionists, really, which is what's really been going on. And logically, they don't want the people to recognize that the priesthood has done this. That's number one. They don't want people to recognize that people who've been claiming to be government did this to you. Number two, that poverty is a political operation, not a nature operation, not a nature anomaly. The earth does not produce any beings that she can't feed. That's number one. Number two, all the living beings of humanity on the planet Earth, when they're telling you overpopulation, what they're telling you is that you're too big for us to control. All of them can fit in the area that you call Rhode Island and have space between you.
You're talking about the one.
The entire population of humanity on planet Earth can fit in the area of what is known as the territorial state of Rhode Island, which is the smallest.
No, we're the smallest.
I
think they're the second, right? They're smaller as us?
Yeah, Rhode Island.
Rhode
Island. Okay. In other words, the whole point, everybody on the planet can fit in that area and have space between them. Okay. So when they told you,
so the lie about all the
it's a lie.
People on the planet is we see the crowded streets.
It's to justify Asia. Their unum sanctum culling operations, which has always been going on. The culling operations is the unum sanctum operations by the priesthood to keep humanity at a certain number where they can control them. So they kill off numbers of them through wars and dealing with the males, because remember, women outnumber males. Females by nature outnumber males, right? So, and then they kill off a number of the children every year so that they don't grow up, and then they use them as product and also for food. And they don't want the people to ever figure that out, although it's coming out little by little. That's a fact. So they'll recession, they'll talk about famine, and all of it is artificially introduced, which is really what they don't want the people to figure out. However, from a divine perspective, our metaphysical divine responsibility to nature, to that which is divine, the proclamation and judicial notice is saying to the world, for the record, I do not consent. Do you expect the criminal to respond to that and say, oh, I got your message. Oh, I'm stop stealing your peanut butter sandwiches and stuff. Oh, I'm going to tell you that the account that you opened at the bank never was yours, that it was ours, and that it's an unsecured loan, and that we intend to bail in because it's structured to do so. And we tricked you into contributing to this retirement fund that we from the beginning were stealing and never intended for you to actually retire. And then when it got to numbers that you were retiring, that
Don't add up.
it doesn't need to add up for people who are believers. See, because remember, when you're dealing with people that won't deal with reality, that won't deal with facts, that won't accept that 2 and 2 is 4 anywhere on the planet, you can tell them anything, which is what our problem is, which is, again, why the proclamation papers are seven pages when it only needs a small statement. I do not consent, and I am not the stock surety for members of the Roman Curia who own the foreign alien corporation known as United States Corporation Company doing human trafficking, which is all you need to say. But it ain't limited to that because these people still think it's a country. You see the problem? So you got to go. And then they say, oh, that's your opinion. So now you got to give them stare decisis. That's why the stare decisis is there. And they don't understand that the operatives operate from this perspective. And this is a fact. Any right you do not claim, they hold it in legal process that you've abandoned that right, and they claim that right and bond it. All their bonds are based on theft of the people's rights. They are soul stealers. They steal light, including their practices of blocking out the sun.
Do you remember when Bush, was it Bush or something, or one of those presidents talked about 1,000 points of light?
Oh, yeah.
They were making a reference to.
You're talking on multiple levels. You know, and people talk about that too, and still, and what you recognize is that people look for the subtleties of the contradictions and don't look deeper. That they're telling you what they're doing to you, because they recognize that divine law and what you call ens legis operations are two different platforms, and that, you know, whereas you can fool men, and you can fool women, you can fool children, and you can fool donkeys and rabbits, but you can't fool Mother Nature.
Yeah, and you can't.
This is the reason why. Either. Yes, this is the reason why, even though they've held the people back and hidden old technologies that's really, according to what we have now, actually supremely advanced. We're not talking about new technologies. We're talking about ancient technologies that are extremely and presently advanced and are in present use by persons that these people thought was their government, who's actually been, this is basic. Let me put this bluntly. These people you've been calling your congressmen and your senators and thinking that you're your representatives have been studying ancient Africa, ancient Egypt, Egypta, ancient Hittites, Canaanites, etc., Lemuria, etc., and to what they could gather, and recognizing how far behind the 8 curve or how the curve of real human culture that they are, has been preserving this knowledge for themselves, but using it to the negative. And they think that their position is that they have robbed the descendants of the great architects of Earth culture to the degree that now they can take over the planet. Now they need to kill you off. That's what their politics are. That's the truth. And again, you're speaking from both from the spirit plane and from the civic organizational structure plane of jurisprudence that I do not consent. And that, again, is the judicial notice. You're not looking for a reply. You're not requesting anything. You're making a declarative statement. That's what you're doing.
I know some people are very concerned, particularly, I think, if they're closer to what we would call that retirement age, you know, that they, you know, a lot of things are probably.
They should be concerned.
Right.
Yeah.
So there are a lot of people concerned with, you know, well, you know, I've been paying, people say my Social Security or whatever.
So that my is really problematic. Yeah, but go ahead. Yeah.
My Social Security and whatever. The younger generation, it's almost a foregone conclusion that there's not going to be a Social Security system, at least not as we know it, for them. They kind of know that they are being used. They're being like they got bigger straws in their necks than they do for the rest of us. So, but the people that are like just about there, they're like, you know, okay, I hear this stuff about nationality and birthright, but I don't want to lose what it is that I have.
I don't want to lose.
They may have a 401k. What is your advice?
This is my advice. This is my advice.
Okay.
And this is really the truth.
That's what we want.
This is the truth.
The whole truth, nothing but.
Their imagination is like that picture I've been looking at, a beautiful picture. It says imagination. That they ever had faith in it was in their imagination. That they have faith in it at all now. And they're worried about it, which they should be. What they should be worried about is this. Remember what we said quite a few years, in these last few years, everybody, whatever God, version of God that they have, they need to call them?
Yes.
This is the grand opportunity for all who've been making God claims on what level, that's not a criticism, to go ahead and make your contacts now, ahead of time, you know, as the chaos comes, you know, because the fire is burning all over the daggone place, because you're going to need them.